municipalities, pure municipalities that do not have the wherewithal for their own structure. So Puerto Rico has a lot of tools that it has not used, and they need to be used through their tax structure, which is something that was already raised here with respect to the withholding tax. And I think one of the recommendations I'll do for the panel is to look at the federal tax structure in Puerto Rico. Because although it's said that Puerto Ricans do not pay taxes, Puerto Ricans and Puerto Ricans entities do pay a lot of taxes, beginning with Medicare and other taxes that are there. And I think as a panel, you can look at what ways to implement our tax laws on the federal side and which way Puerto Rico can adjust its tax laws to promote jobs. Because once again, at the end of the day, it's all about jobs and the economy. Third, a piece of advice that I can bring also to the board is, once again, to use the IRS to help Puerto Rico through its tax collection and its tax system, because there is plenty of money in Puerto Rico that if it will be correctly taxed and correctly spent, the Puerto Rican economy would be much better and Puerto Rican unemployment would be much lower. Last one, it's the Department of Agriculture is not here. There has been a program in Puerto Rico that has been highly successful that was terminated a couple of years ago, which is Pan y Trabajo, welfare to work for. Welfare to work for was a payroll tax credit using excess food stamps money that created 3,000 jobs a month in Puerto Rico, and it's no longer being implemented. You don't need anything else than to allow from the federal government to use some of that food stamps money that it's excess, that in Puerto Rico is given as an aguinaldo. When there's an excess money, then they give you another payment in the holiday season. Instead, we should promote jobs. Once again, it's all about jobs, and it's about developing the economy of Puerto Rico. I commend the President for bringing the economic issue over the status issue, because it is the issue. The status issue will take years to solve no matter what. Puerto Ricans are very divided. It needs a whole process from the U.S. engagement. Things that we need to do now, it's the economy, and we can start today. Thank you.
I just want to make a comment. USDA is part of this working group, but just so you know.
Good afternoon. My name is Luis Vega Ramos, ranking minority member of the Ways and Means Committee of the House of Representatives of Puerto Rico. I'm an elected official of the Popular Democratic Party. I'm very happy that the task force is dealing with current federal programs and laws and recovery funds that have to do with helping Puerto Rico out of the current jam. But we also need to take into consideration, we need to look forward into the bigger problem, which is the need to fashion a new economic model for Puerto Rico, for the middle and the long term. Puerto Rico had a model that ran from the early 1950s to the early 1990s, which was more or less called Operation Bootstrap, which was based on the reality that Puerto Rico was the only common market jurisdiction with the United States at the time in the Americas. For 40-some, 50-some years, Puerto Rico had the luxury of being the only jurisdiction in the Americas to have open access to the market as citizens, of persons, of goods, of services, of currency to the United States. That started changing in the late 80s and in the 90s. And that's one of the fundamental problems that the Puerto Rican economy has. The structural advantage that we had for 40 or 50 years of being the only jurisdiction in the America which had an open market relationship, an open market access relationship with the United States, when that no longer was an advantage, then the Puerto Rican economy started suffering. And then we had the added blow that at some point Section 936 of the Internal Revenue Code was repealed, and that was basically the whole structure that had permitted economic development and job creation in Puerto Rico for around 50 or 60 years. And that's the reality. We're living in a whole new different ballgame. So we need to deal with a new economic model that permits Puerto Rico to fashion its own economic future, to be the spokesperson and the main actor of a project that promotes self-sufficiency, that creates Puerto Rican capital, and that permits the exportation of Puerto Rican ingenuity, Puerto Rican talent, Puerto Rican services, and Puerto Rican corporations throughout the world. And to do that, our system can no longer be based on a grant of a law or a program that this Congress may give you, called Section 936, so that a future Congress and a future administration may take away. We need to fashion a different model, and for that, ultimately, you do have to deal with the status issue. In order for Puerto Rico to have a long-term economic model, the status issue needs to be addressed. But in the meantime, maybe there are some things that could be done. For example, I think this task force should look very closely into exempting Puerto Rico from U.S. shipping laws. That could be very helpful in the short run in maybe lowering the costs of goods sold in Puerto Rico. It wouldn't be something entirely without precedent. It could be part of a larger arrangement when the status issue is dealt with, but as starters, it is something that this task force should look for. Puerto Rico has a large investment in a project in the south of the island, southern part of the island, the Port of the Americas, that could greatly benefit by Puerto Rico being specifically exempted, or at least that port facility being exempted from U.S. shipping laws. I think you should really look into the possibility of acknowledging some scope of international economic authority to the government of Puerto Rico, recognizing that Puerto Rico took the capacity to enter into international agreements, economic agreements. I think that should be part of a larger package of the development of the current political status into a sovereign Estado Libre Asociado or a sovereign Commonwealth. But in the meantime, I think you should specifically study that option. Why? Because Puerto Ricans' solutions to a better Puerto Rican economy will be made by people in Puerto Rico. The United States government can have all the good faith that they want to have, or that you want to have, and I understand that's the case. But only Puerto Ricans can look out for themselves in the economic international arena, and we need to recognize us, the people of Puerto Rico, the capacity to look and fend for ourselves in the international arena, and that doesn't necessarily mean that Puerto Rico has to break ties or break relations or break an association with the United States. That could be fashioned as part of the larger political and juridical model. But I want to leave at this part of the discussion with this important thought, which summarizes what I'm trying to say. In order for the economy of Puerto Rico to really jumpstart as it did in the 1950s, you have to have an all-encompassing model. It cannot be a law here that can be given today and repealed tomorrow. It cannot be a program that can be here today, gone tomorrow. It cannot be a special package of funds that can be here and not be renewed the next year. You have to really look forward. And the tool to do that is really clearly taking Puerto Rico out of any territorial authority that Congress and the administration can have over Puerto Rico, or any remaining territorial authority that may be over Puerto Rico, and fashioning a future that what Puerto Rico and the United States decide it's good for both of them, it really has the binding force of a contract. Until we can speak and contract as equals, and that contract have binding consequences for both of us, Puerto Rico is ultimately going to be subject to what you decide is good for Puerto Rico, and not necessarily what we decide is good for Puerto Rico. And that's what that needs to be taken care of in order for the economy to move forward. I certainly do commend you in finding ways in the short run to try to get things moving again in Puerto Rico, and I'm really happy that you're doing that. But one thing is really linked to the other.